EI. And today it gives me distinct pleasure to welcome our feature presenter, Plamaletta Berry, who is an accomplished data enthusiast with extensive experience in data analytics and visualization. She currently works as a senior manager of data products delivery at Life Labs in Canada. Plamaletta previously worked as a program evaluation specialist at Ontario MD Canada and regional director of publishing at Yellow Media Group Caribbean. She is also an adjunct lecturer at the University of Toronto Institute of Health Policy, Management and Evaluation, and alumni of the Masters in Health Informatics program. Passionate about transferring complex data into compelling narratives, Plamaletta has led successful projects in healthcare, publishing, data-related M&E projects, and other industries. I now have the pleasure to welcome Plamaletta as our featured speaker and presenter today. Welcome, Plamaletta. Over to you, please.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks you to everyone for coming out today. Just for a bit of confession here, I've been trying I think Valerie has been trying to get me to speak on this topic for a while, and I finally have decided that it's time, and no better time than on the 10th anniversary. So thank you all for coming out. Hopefully I can present as much as I can for your own knowledge. The flow will be that I will present, and at the end, I think is the way we have it planned, you'll be able to ask some questions. If in between there is a burning question, you could put it in the chat and we'll take it from there. All right, just give me a minute to get my screen started here. All right, so data visualization for M&E. I'm going to be touching on some varying topics here, so just bear with me as we go through the topic. It is said that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we know that within the M&E space, as the world, as you know it today, requires instant info for decision-making and actionable insights. It is very critical that we sort of shift away from not just putting reports that are dense with words, but also visual storytelling that can really impact decision makers as to what they want to present. I think somebody has their sound on. Sorry about that. Could mute. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think in this fast-paced world, we have lots and lots of opportunities available to us now to present data in a different way. And nobody wants to consume data at the dense pace as we have done in the past for really actionable insights and just info on the go as well that you can really consume quickly. In terms of data visualization, I wanted to just quickly say that it's like the third level in terms of a reporting workflow when you're building out data visualization. That's the end, somewhat of an end product of once you've collected your data, you have all this data in front of you. What do you do with it next, right? So normally you have to have some method of connecting to that data. And when I say modeling the data, it's preparing all of that in a method that makes it easily consumable within the framework that you're going to be working with to develop this. And I'm actually going to do a quick demo of what I mean by that at the very end. Generally, in this space, 70%, almost 80% of your time is actually spent preparing that data. And the other 25% of the time is really the storytelling and the visualization of that, because a really great interactive or well-designed visual is based on how well you have done your data preparation in advance and in order for you to tell the story. And the rest of it is preparing it for use and using different mediums. And we'll go through a few of those to say how you'd present that out as well. So ChatGPT is the new way of in my mind of dictionary lookup. So in terms of a definition for what is effective data visualization, it's defined it as a strategic use of graphical representations and narratives to convey the insights or outcomes of your program and project performance. It usually means that once you're developing a visual, which is really a picture or a graphical chart, it could be, or whatever outcome that you want to present and how you want to present it, whether it be a card that shows growth, etc. At the end of the day, data visualization matters and it has to be effective. And so looking at these at it from this angle, then you say that from an effectiveness, that it's crucial for assessing the effectiveness of programs and projects. And I'll show you an example of what I mean later on. It's a critical aspect of reporting. M&E in itself is evidence-based. And depending on who your audience is, or the purpose or the medium or the tool that you're using, the effectiveness is important. You need to be actionable, moving away from just have a reliance on spreadsheet to more of a storytelling that's actionable. So interactive, you can easily see the information that you need. And not only see the information that you need, in that you can also keep adding more data and not having to redo it again. It also needs to be impactful, so you need to understand the story that you're telling, that the audience will remember it, they can make decisions from it quickly, and that you're not losing anyone in a sea of confusion, depending on if it's a non-technical audience that you are conveying this to as well. So some key considerations to think about when you're looking at data visualization is, the first one is to consider is who is the audience for this visualization that you're putting together. Your general audience, as you know them, your donors, your policymakers, your program managers, the beneficiaries, etc. Different folks may need a different a visual or medium to look at. So it's also important to consider that. What's the purpose for which you're writing it? It might need a really detailed report as opposed to an infographics as a medium. So you need to understand what the purpose is for. And then the tool will and I always say you do the audience, the purpose, the medium before deciding on the tool that you're going to use. The tool is always the last thing that one should always consider. Now, once all that's done, then we need to understand what are some of the challenges that we have in the space right now. And I suppose this is where coming out of this presentation, we're hoping that we can do some further work within the CEI to cover some of these gaps as some training opportunities. One of it is building capacity, addressing the skill gap within the space. As you sort of think through some of the work that you're doing today and the audience that you have and where we are in terms of technology and how fast persons need to make decisions, then this is a skill set that is complementary to what you already do today, and training in this would be a great advantage to you. In terms of change management and adoption challenges, it's really, are you willing to change? And also, how do you convey the new change of how you're doing things to your audience as well? The other thing to consider is that as you move away from your own environment that you have, which is in your own control, that is your spreadsheet, etc., and you move to specific environments that you want to, say you have an interactive visual that you want to share, is to understand the privacy and security concerns around that, especially if you're working with anything around PI, which is personal information, or anything that includes personal health information. It becomes important. Data quality is also critical, as you're already aware. In this current space, quality is important. Garbage in, garbage out. Wrong decisions can be made as well. Data preparation, as I alluded to earlier, like 75 to 80% of the work you do is in the preparation. If you don't gather data properly, understand the quality of the data coming in and how to prepare different attributes to talk to each other. For example, if you have your indicators and then you have your programs, how do you make sure that the different pieces are put together, what I call the model? How do you model that properly so that it becomes just a drag and drop scenario later on for you, which makes it easier to do visualization. Data ethics is a big consideration these days as well. That's a new, that's coming up as we start to expose more data beyond your spreadsheet. So that's another consideration. How do you integrate this with your existing workflow of everything else that you're doing to make sure that it's consistent, it makes sense, and the quality is preserved is another area to be considered. The governance around the information that you have, how it changes, who owns the owners of the data, do you get permission to publish this information, all that sort of thing is very important. The tooling and operation costs can sometimes be an hindrance to some of what you do because some of the very cool tools are not cheap. Sometimes some will come with some degree of free tools, but in order to get it onto the web, you have to pay for that. Example, Power BI, which is one of the tools that I'll be demoing today. So I'll pause there for a second. Is there any quick questions? Let me just see if somebody had a burning question. I think not, so I'll continue on. So design principles, we're going to look at some of the things that we need to consider when we're designing a visual. I always go with very simple is best. Your design should be clear. There should be clarity in what you're doing. It should be as simple as you possibly can. So you don't want to be too complex. Again, it's back to your audience, especially non-technical folks. You have to make sure the information is clear, it makes sense, it's relevant, it's interactive. You are telling a story. So as you put information on there, it just should not be just to put information for just dropping slides on, visuals on just for dropping visuals on because they look pretty. Because you can get carried away once you start to see so many visuals available to you, and I'll show you what I mean by that further down. Accessibility is very important because you're moving away from the paper, and some of this can be in a mobile app or it can be in a web, so it's important that you understand what is required there. The ability to have annotations, be able to test it with the group that you're working with just to get feedback as well as to make sure from a usability perspective, it makes sense. So those are the good areas that you should always consider. In terms of what not to do is like similar to what I said earlier, no overcrowding. So you shouldn't have like too many images on one page, visuals on one page. The information should not be misleading, but again, I think quite a few of these would have been things that you would have already considered given your proficiency in this field. The complexity should be considered in terms of, I think, more of, say, an interactive design. That would be one of those. Overuse of colors. When you get into the space, colors is very important. Again, this should be carryover from some of the work you're doing, because what you're putting on paper to present today, some of those concepts should carry over as well. Over-reliance on technology, ignoring accessibility, ignoring feedback, and forgetting your audience. Again, those are also things that you have to make sure that you take in consideration. And the reason I say the latter 4 areas is because adoption is key. If they're not liking what they're seeing, it's not going to be used, and so it's of no use to anyone. So you would have wasted your time. So those are critical areas to consider. A quick example of an overuse of color is, as you can see in the example above, depending on the chart type that you choose, it needs to be best suited for the data you're using it for. And having too many colors within a chart can be very confusing, right? And depending on if, say, chart 1 and chart 2 are talking about the same legend ideas, then if you start changing colors, then that can become confusing as well. And again, accessibility consideration need to be there. If you're having like a branded color palette, say in your normal reporting, you're like say you're using hues of greens and blues and whatever. Sometimes it's best to bring that across in your visual as well, so you just be consistent. It's like a branding, and you're known for this report all the way through as well. You can move from simple when you're doing visualization and storytelling. It could be from very simple, where it's just KPIs with gauges and cards that give you like month over month. You could see growth percentage, etc. In there, as well as you can move to more complex type of visuals, and that will tell the story. Again, it depends on the story you want to tell. So as we look at some of the techniques around choosing the right visual, Dr. Andrew Abdella, sorry, some time ago came up with this chart that sort of help you in determining what visuals you go with, depending on what you want to do. So if you're looking at a comparison, there's specific charts that you want to look at for comparison versus a relationship versus a composition distribution. And I added in geography as well, because it depends on what you want to show from a geographical perspective. So I find this to be a neat chart to sort of just help you along to determine which of these best suit whatever it is that you want to represent. In terms of mediums, so for the audience that you're doing, it all depends again. So you can do, this is a visualization more from an infographics perspective, but again, you're still using the same storytelling, right? So this could be that you're attending a conference and you want a quick outlay. You're looking for funding and you just want something quick that you want to send out to tell the story. And so you'll have these type of visuals that you may want to present, right? It's not necessarily, it has to be an interactive design. So this is more static. It could also be in your own PowerPoint presentation. You're putting together a very simple design of, around your programs. You're telling the status of the program, how much revenue you have had, how much was the cost, etc. This is very simple. You could get more complex and put more diagrams on. Again, you have to be careful how many pieces you put on. It could be crowded, it could be very confusing. But again, you have this sort of display that you can actually do in your PowerPoint. In this one here, it's not interactive. If you use Power BI and I think Tableau, which is another BI software, then you can actually have these interactive within the PowerPoint itself. So while you're presenting to your different vendor donors or whoever it is that you're presenting to, or program management at that point, you can click as you go along. We don't throw away good old Excel, because you still can do really neat designs in Excel. Actually, the backend of Excel, which is we call the advanced Excel portion, actually uses the same concept as Power BI, which is a more slick BI tool to do data preparation. And so it's a matter of having a visual understanding of how you can do this. I've dropped a link on here. You could see I took this from the site that they have done a really neat way of presenting data. So this is the cheaper way, but it still works. Then you have interactive designs like Power BI that you can do, right? So in this instance, you can actually design it in a way that it actually interacts. If you click on a program, it should give you information about that program as you see fit, right? So you click, it's very interactive in this instance in terms of what you want to do. You could also have an embedded interactive design inside of a web page. This is a program that was done some time back. Here it's inside of the web page itself. So you have a dashboard view as part of it. You can go in and you could start to look at your data this way. So depending on who your end user is, they can come in. It could be the public, or it could just be an individual. They could start to see information here. So if you wanted to see the females of this age group were in this health zone that they belong, then it would basically start to interact, right? You can have information when you move over this. It could give you additional information that you want to learn about. If you click off that, then you can look at different headings in terms of an overview of the entire program. You could look at a month, a specific year, what was happening in that year, etc. So that's another way you can also look at how you present that data. This is another one I found from an Australian website where this is actually a mobile view of the data. So this is a website that has a responsive design. What I mean by responsive design is that once it's built, if you're on your mobile phone, this is a mobile view of how you would see the data, as opposed to if you're on the website. So in this instance, this is on their website. Let me just make sure that this is clickable. So you could see that they have multiple indicators on the housing. And as you click through each indicator, it will give you the information about that indicator. And then you could tell what's going on. So that's another way of looking at design. I thought this one was a really cool way of looking at the info as well. And this is a mobile view. I took the screenshot from my own phone where I could actually see it on my mobile phone displayed as well. This is per screen. There are a lot of tools out there. I've only took a few examples of tools to show today. So the one I'm going to be demoing is Power BI, which is the one I work with a lot. So I'm more familiar with that tool. But in terms of from a quantitative analysis, you have Tableau. It has a free site that you can upload to. However, you have to purchase the tool, the desktop tool, to create the visual. Power BI is the opposite. The desktop tool is free. So after this call, you can download the app and start practicing. However, in order to share, and you can also publish the visual into their Power BI service. The difference though is that if you want to share with other users or use their new AI initiative that they've had, which is called Copilot, you'll have to pay for that. But other than that, if you just want to start learning right off the bat, this is one way of doing it. You have Flourish, which is also a good tool. You can get easy designs quickly going, but for any advanced features, again, you have to pay for that. And of course, Excel, you can use your Excel easily as well. Qualitative, I haven't gone through these per se, but I've seen RapidMiner used in the past. Most of what we do for any text related in my current work is usually through AI-related applications, but you could try some of these. Or if you're already using some of these, that would be a good tool to get going on. I'll stop there before I get into a demo and just do a time check.
You're good on the time, Flamalita. You're
okay.
only
Okay,
20.
great.
Yeah, but at least half an hour more.
Like an hour. All right. Half an hour. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll stop here. Is there any questions before I go into demoing just the Power BI tool? No, nothing in the chat. Just double checking.
I suspect a lot of this is so new to many of us that, you know, we're just absorbing and looking at utility.
Okay.
So,
All right. So
like,
let me, okay, I'm going to skip just here first before and go down one slide, and then I'll go into a demo of the Power BI. So I know this is a bit crowded, but this is just an extension of the chart I showed you earlier, where you can, in Power BI, you'll see that there are a lot of predefined visuals, meaning you don't have to create these on your own. They're all predefined for you. Again, data prep is critical. So once you have your data prep, then you can just drag your information onto these and use whichever ones. There's whether it's forecasting, part to whole, meaning you're using pie charts or change over time, depending on what you're doing. It's really easy to get going. But again, data prep is very critical for this to be successful. All right, I'm going to pause here. Just give me a minute to just bring my Power BI screen over, and we'll do a bit of work there.
there was a question, Plumaletta, from Nirmita. Did you mention that if we transfer our visualization developed in Power BI or Tableau in slides or PowerPoint, they will still be interactive?
Yes, it can be, but the interactive piece will have to be from the Power BI service itself. And I'm going to show you that as well, what I mean. Yeah, I'm hoping that I'll have enough time, because I really wanted a latter piece for you to see some of what I'm doing. I think there's Albert Beckford. You have a question? There's a hand raised.
Hi, are you hearing me?
Yes, I can.
All right, good afternoon, Promalita. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, so I have a question. Not sure if you touched this, but I didn't really hear. How do you approach incorporating user feedback into the design process and, you know, the iteration on the on data visualization?
That's a very good question. I always say before you get started is to do more of a wireframing of what you're trying to accomplish first, to get some feedback, not necessarily from your final audience, as I would call it, like your in this case, say is your donor or whoever you're giving that information to. But just to wireframe it for your own sense of how that's working, and you can use tools like Canva or the tools just to put it together. And then once you've done that and you have your first release, you publish that to the service. In this case, I'm using Power BI. You'd publish that to the service, share the link with that person so that they can have a view of it, and then have an audience with them so they can watch them interact with it, so that you can see some of what's working, not working. That's one way to look at it. Another one is for them to just give you straight feedback. For example, I had one user, we just presented some information to them, and I'm watching them clicking and realize some of it isn't working the way I thought it would work. Another one is you have set up the page that looks almost like an app, and they're clicking and some things are just not working for them. When you get really advanced in this work, you start to use things like bookmarks or interactive display, and some things just don't work the way you had intended it. So that's one way of doing that. Sometimes the visuals that you use are confusing, and they will tell you for sure.
Okay, thank you. I have more questions, but I'll save them for a little later.
All right, thanks. All right, just give me 1 minute to drag my screen across. So this is something I had developed some time back for a client, and so I'm going to share with you how this is done. Tommy, are you seeing my screen okay? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for confirming. I'm just going to delete this. So when I talk about data prep, what we're looking for is how the data comes together in the backend. Now, this might look confusing to you, but I want you to think through it carefully, what I'm going to tell you. So say you have collected different pieces of data. So you have collected information about the sex, you have some age range, you may want to display different formats of an age range, or you may have age, but you don't want to display the actual age as well. So you want to make sure that the ranges are done properly, or you have the varying labelings of how you have done it. These are usually kept separate for the most part. Then you have like your health regions here, the parish. Somehow you have to understand how to split apart your data to make it work in an interactive way. And this part is a totally different conversation that we'll have and a training opportunity as well. So I won't go into detail with you, but just to say that when I talked about a data model, I don't want to scare you off, but that's like putting the data together. I have worked with somebody, hopefully was on this call before, and I don't think it was overly difficult. I hope she'll agree. But once you have it and the model is all ready, then you have all your data presented to you here. So in Power BI, when you go on, you have to prepare your data first for it to work for you, but you can just take some basic data, import it, and away you go. And I'll do something like that for you in a little bit as well. But this is already an established model. So in this model, for example, if I say, sorry, I'm going to switch my sharing screen. I feel like the screen is way too far from my eyes and I'm somewhat half blind. Just give me a minute, please. Let me see if my glasses will make a difference. Sorry, I'm just going to stop sharing for one tiny second. Just switch which screen I share on. I'm just bringing this back to my eyes so I can see it. Guys seeing screen still?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Say we wanted a simple thing as a bar chart. So you click on the bar chart, right? So that's what you want. And as I said, the visual is already there for you. So in here, it gives you all the visuals. If you don't see something you want, you can click out to a site that Microsoft has and you can get more visuals and bring it in. But say you wanted a visual here, we wanted to see the year, wanted to see the month, and we wanted in measures is where you put all your calculations, and we wanted to see what's the total male population. Now you could see that the year is on the x-axis and the month is on the legend. So if that's not what we normally do, right? We normally have the month here and the year on the legend. It's as simple as that. You get your first visual, right? That's as simple as it is to start creating a visual. Remember, I talked about simplicity to start with. And if you wanted just a summation up here to say, okay, I just want to show what the total male overall is, then it's as simple as saying that's a total male. Right. If you wanted to say show some data based on the age range, then you pick the age range that you're interested in, right? You'd have known your fields already. And you want to see the age range for, say, male again. I'm just picking one here. Let's go with percentage instead. And you wanted to see that like that view. Not that it's the right visual, because we have to always choose the right visual. It's as simple as that. or if you just want to say change your mind as the chart you want, it's as simple as that as well. This is a bit more interactive, so you can ask me a few more questions as I go along. You can also take, in here you have what we call the filters. So on here, if I'm just going to select this again, you notice I had an all years here in a blank. If I don't want those in, I just click on select all and just deselect the things I don't want. If I wanted to, this to be more interactive, meaning I want the user to be able to select, say, for example, the parish of interest, and I want it as a filter, right? So that they can select that, and I click on filter here, which is a filter option. It has a format, your visual option, where you can go in and format and say how you want this to be. So I want this to be a drop down. So I come here and say it turns it into a drop down. You see, it's slowly looking like I'm creating an app. And I can then select just Kingston only, Clarendon only. Or if I hold down my Control key, I could select multiple as well. Right. How you design your visual and tell your story is very important. So you want to keep, for example, your filters to the left, or you can say all of them across the top. You want to make sure that your cards, refer to these as cards, which is like your totals at the top, right? So as you click in, for example, it will show the totals for whatever you're clicking in, right? You want to make sure like those cards are at the top, right? So how you design that is important. Let me see what else I can show you here. I'm going to use one of these, a pie chart. And for the pie chart, if I wanted to see the facility type, hopefully that's not too much data, not really. And I want to see, again, back to my measures. Let's see if total results data is there. Then away you go. Create your pie chart right away. If I decided that I wanted this to be a table instead, then you could change it to a table. It could look like that, but instead, if you want it to be a matrix, you could change it to a matrix and add the sex and the column. And it automatically does it for you. Those are just really quick ways of doing things. You could change the background color if you wanted to as well. You could upload images if you wanted to create, like you have a standard look and feel for your logo. You could put those in for your business logo, etc. You could do that as well. I'll take a question or somebody asks me to do, probably based on the data we're seeing here, something I could probably attempt to mock up. While you're thinking that through, I'll show you the design that you had seen on the screen earlier. What that looks like. So this is the screen that I was showing earlier, where I've designed the cards at the top just to show the numbers. You bring in an image. So these are images to represent male, female, and you can have your heading for your page. So your page header, so you know what the page name is. You could add like an icon here and add information in there if you want to click out. So for example, if I do control click, within here, it could take me to a website that could provide additional information. Or if you have a page that has information on it to tell you how to use say from an adoption, you want persons to know how to use the information or to define certain terms on here, then you could put an informational icon and put a link to the page that has that info, and that will give it that to you. But that's getting into more detailed designing that makes it have the look and feel that you're looking for, and just to adapt to the story that you're trying to tell. Again, this is interactive, an interactive design. So as you click on it, it will start to give you information that you need. Again, same concept of having a drop down if you only want to look at cervical cancer, or if you want to look at breast and colon, you could do that as well. Clear filters. These are just additional design on here, just from a UI. As Albert asked earlier, users will say, well, how do I clear everything when I'm done? You see, you add features on here that will help the user along, so that they don't have to remember where they last clicked. So if I clicked here, and then I click there, and then I click here, there's so many places that I already clicked. So if I do a clear filter, it takes me back to the origin. So a part of this is designing, but that's a little bit more advanced. Have I lost anybody yet?
Well, I'm not lost as yet, but I have a follow-up question, and this screen is a perfect place that I think I can ask it. So on that top right, and that visual in the top right, you will notice that the respiratory disease is it's quite a lot compared to the others. And so my question is, how do you handle outliers? In this case, it's not too bad because you can still see the range from 0 to 200. But what if, say, that first one was a million? Then the diagram might then start looking a bit distorted. So how do you handle those situations?
That's a very good question. Are you trying to bold me over? Hang on. So in this case, you can go to what we call the x-axis and the y-axis, and you could either adjust that there into, hang on, let me do one first thing here. There's an option here for you to do the focus out where you can actually see the full thing. So let me go back and do that again. So in this case, if that's, oh, that's a good question. You could either adjust that based on your x or y, sorry, in your axis here, where you set up the how you define the number, or the sorry, for that range. Because right now this is an auto range from the visual, so you could do that here as well. So you would need to access this. I would generally say, in these instances where the range is way off, I normally don't display the axis on the side. I just leave the numbers at the top, because then your eyes get distorted to start looking over here, right? So you just leave the numbers at the top, and that will take care of it. It will just automatically shrink itself to align to the number. The other thing could be, is this the best display for this data as well? So that you could consider if this is the right visual for this data, if this number is way off, because then it doesn't reflect exactly what you want.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Just going back to the chat. You're welcome. This is from Chantal. Am I saying that name correctly? What is your opinion on using dark mode designs? A lot of people tend to prefer lighter backgrounds. Again, Chantal, this is dependent on the accessibility portion that I mentioned. It also dependent on the device that the person is viewing this from. I always say lighter backgrounds better. When it's printed, sometimes persons want to print it as well. So you also have to think about the usage of the design. I'm not a big fan of dark mode designs at all, especially for the type of work that is done in this space. it needs to be clear. There are multiple audience that's sometimes using the same material. So in my mind, at light mode, lighter backgrounds are preferable. So, and this is from Rena. So let's do that immediately to see what your thoughts are. There we go. Your thoughts on this one? I agree with you. That's a better design. The problem, can somebody say what the problem is with this though? What do I need to fix?
Good question.
Sorry.
Yeah, I like the left one where the pie chart is filled better. But I don't know. Yes, that one. I don't know what the problem is with the donut chart.
So now that I've done this, something is not right with this. Can you tell?
Probably the color choice.
Yes, the colors. And so for that, because this is the same color as this, right? So it's not showing a differentiation between these two. So in that case, you could go here to the slices and basically just change the color. So you could give, say, a darker blue like that, and that's it. Any other question? That was a good one. Thank you. Yeah, Namita, you got it right. It was a color. Anything else anybody else can think of that they would want me to look at?
Well, I noticed that in the left pie chart, you have cancer in the writing with the red color, but it's not visible. I don't know if you can do something about that or just make the pie chart larger, or is it really 0?
Yeah, it's because it's the percentage is so small, but if you do an out focus on that, it's still small, but you'll see it just a slitter. And the percentage, yeah, it's just very small. In some instances, some folks will leave that out because it's you don't really, it's not significant number, but yeah, it's there.
But maybe in a case like this, would you also maybe accompany the pie chart with a table, that actually shows the figures? I mean, it goes against the grain of visualization, but especially the example Albert mentioned, where if you have a very high number as well as very low numbers, perhaps, you would have to, a table highlighting those extremes could also help.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because as you look at cancer, when you blow that out on its own, you could see that it's not a lot of data that's collected, 74, but you can use a table. But sometimes you have to think clearly about what you want to present because this is your overview page. The way I normally do design is I give a high-level overview, like an executive overview. So if you come on there, at a glance, what do you want to say? Right? Sometimes at a glance, you only want to see your top 3, your top 10 if it's a lot of numbers. You don't really need to see the whole thing. So it all depends on what you think is your overview. This might not be the right chart for an overview either. You may want to do something else. So we can try other concepts, right? So this might be a better view as well. You can see a slitter of what that is. So it all depends on what you're looking at, and you can choose a different layout that best suits what you're doing. But yes, the table would also be a good one that you could put on the page.
Nirmita wants you to show again how you create the sex disaggregated chart.
This one at the bottom?
Is that it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, so there's a visual for it. So you notice when I clicked on it, this visual showed up. It's called a tornado. So it doesn't come with the normal Power BI, what I should call it, the default visuals, right? You'd have to go into the get more visuals. Not sure if I'm signed in. Let me attempt to see if I'm signed in. I can get it. You'd have to go to Microsoft site if you're signed up, and then it should give you some additional visuals. Remember, I shown you that visual chart earlier, where you can have, so you have hundreds of additional on here. So if you look at the
all three, if I download the desktop version.
yeah, but you have to sign up. So you need to sign up to on the Power BI, create an account and sign in, and then you'll be able to get access to this. This is free as well. You don't have to pay for this. And so this is the tornado chart. And once you select that chart, it will pop right in, and then you can start to look at it. You have other charts as well that you can start to look at, and other designs, right? You have animated charts, you have the zebra chart. So you have other charts that you can use. Usually what I do is I see a chart that I like, I'd want to use per se. What I'd first do is, say for example, there's this chart where you can do multiple. Let's give that a second to load. It appears that you can do like 4 charts on one here. I'd come in here first, and I'll just take a quick look through of what they're presenting and how it works, right? So they want like the top 5 value on this chart. So they're splitting out the different states here. I'll do that first, and then once I'm done with that, then I'll probably, oops, come on. Yeah, oops, did I come out? Let me go back in. Doesn't matter, I'll just take, oh, they have an infographics designer there as well. So you can do your infographics here as well. Let's just take a simple one. So say you have this chart and you like it. Sometimes they give a sample, which is actually a Power BI report. So you just basically download that and look and see how they have built it, right? So that's part of your learnings. You see how they build it. You try and understand how they create the measures behind it beforehand, and then you go ahead and bring it in and use it yourself.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah. Did you still want to see how I built it or not?
I think I got it.
Okay, great. All right, let me see. Is there any other question?
Plamalita, I see that there's an Excel workbook here, so you can actually have your raw data in Excel and then just quickly import it in. Is that correct?
Correct. So I was starting to prep some data. So I have this data here. So, and you can do this in Excel too, right? So I'll just show you this quickly. So this is some data I downloaded from, I think it was the UNR site, I can't remember, but I got this from one of those open data sites. And you notice that the data, I'm assuming these are Likert values for some of these and probably some other values that they're collecting, but whatever it is, they have these questions at the top, which is your survey questions, more like would it appear or whatever your indicator is. So you have these questions on here, but you want to represent this data in a way that you can then show income level, etc. What I've done with this is to take this first, and I created what I call a, let me just make this bigger. So what I did was I took this data and used what I call advanced Excel, and actually pivot this table or in such a way that I'm getting all the data flowing like this without actually manually doing it myself. So now that I have the data in this format, it's easier to report on. So in Excel itself, I can start saying, let me stay here. Let me insert I wanted to do something Excel for a minute. Say I wanted a chart. Now let me do a pivot table first. New. So in here, oops, cancel. So I have the country. Sorry, the screen is just a little bit, Zoom is hiding a few stuff here. I can insert this as a slicer for this as well. And say I want country, right? So like I can click on it like that. But in this instance, I want the country to be at the very top of the page. And so I'm going to say I want the columns to be like that. I'm just changing the columns right here in the slicer. So I want that at the top. And then just going to shift that down a bit. Going to move that over to here. And you're still having this, right? And you want your income group to be over here. And then you want your values. Again, it's for a specific, I have to go back to the data and see what that was. So for specific sequence. So I'm going to take 1.1. And that was attribute. See? And just like that, that's that. So let's clear all my filters and you could see, or actually this would be best displayed the other way around. Attribute and the countries like that. Now we'd have to figure out what these numbers represent, and so we can better determine what to do with those values. But just like that, you could see right away, I took the data that initially looked like this, right? Transform it to this without actually manually doing it, and then getting it to that. And the part of transformation is where I'll show you in a minute. I'm going to show you what I did and then replicate it. So basically what I did is I brought this in as the source. I unpivot the table. So I selected these 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, and then I just say unpivot. I'm going to demo it in a little bit to show you. And then I split out the column to get rid of the numbers off the list and just keep them in their own. Change the type, rename a few columns, and then that's how I did it. So if I were to tell you this brand new, is that in here, I went to, same thing you asked me, I said, I want to start doing some data prep, get and transform is the heading here, right? So I want to do some transformation of this from this table range. It opens up the screen. I looked at my data and I said, well, I'd prefer if this flow in such a way that when I click on region or whatever, I can start to get things based on like this, based on these, right? It's very hard to do it the other way around. So I select all 3, go to transform, and I say on pivot, the other columns. I don't want these columns, I want the other columns to on pivot. And so it drops like that. And right away, it's the same data, but I've just changed the layout of it without manually doing it. And then if I wanted to just split this off from here, I need to figure out what do I want to use to split it? Did I hear a question? Just checking for the time. Are we still good on time?
Yes, we're at 1:57.
Okay. Yeah, and so I just split it out. And then for here, I'm just going to say split that column. I could say by position. Is it always? No, it's not always 2. So I'm going to do by delimiter. And I'm going to do by, say, space. I only want the leftmost, which is the first instance of that space that I want to split. And it splits it like that. So this is where I'm talking about data prep. I've gone way over in beyond visualization, but if you notice all that I've been saying, 75% of your work is going to be making sure you get the data in a format that makes it easy to drag and drop what you need. And that's how I created that. I'll stop there because I don't see any other questions.
Okay. I just wanted to jump in before we conclude and just address the outline issue that Albert had raised. I didn't want to take away from your time because I wanted persons to ask their questions. So an outlier, there are two issues that you can have an outlier. It can either be that it is a genuine case, and he's correct. If it is a genuine case and you had 100 cases and that was a genuine case that was a real outlier, it would skew your data when you're reporting, or it could be an error made when you're transcribing the data from one source to another. So for example, if we were looking at all the states in the US and we were looking at murder rates, and every state in the US, the murder rate hovered somewhere between 18 and 20 per month. And in the District of Columbia, it was at 81. It could have been that it was a genuine case that it was 81 in the District of Columbia, or it could have been that the numbers were transposed when entering it into the spreadsheet. As Plumalita said, garbage in, garbage out. So you do need to fact check certain things when you spot things that look like anomalies. So instead of entering 81, let's say it wasn't really 81, it wasn't a genuine case. You transpose the numbers, it was supposed to be 18, but you entered 81. Well, if you can pick it up, you can correct it. But let's say for some reason you couldn't go back to the data for whatever reason because you don't have the original data sources. There are a few ways you can deal with it. One is to completely delete it and note in your methodology that was deleted because it was an outlier. And if you included it, it would have skewed the average to something much higher for the overall average for the states for the murder rate. Or you could record it using either the mode, the most popular value for all the states, or the median value, right? So those are options in statistical analysis that you have for doing that and to try to get rid of it. Now, if it is a genuine outlier, you have two options. You can report it with the genuine outlier because you've fact checked and it was 81 rather than 18. So you report it with that. But of course, it has skewed the average for every other state because it's only in the District of Columbia that the murder rate is 81. Everywhere else, it's between 18 and 21. So then you might want to still report it to the mode value and then report it to get a more representative value. So just thought I would share that with you. So there are several techniques you can use to deal with an outlier. But Plumaletta, this was really very, sorry, let me put on my camera. This was really very interesting.
Oh, Curlin has a question, Nadine. Curlin has a question. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Miss Berry, how do you have presented to many different audiences, and how would you ensure that your data visualizations are accessible and easily understandable for stakeholders who may, one, have different cultural backgrounds or language deficiencies, if I might call it that, and or people with disabilities?
So for, thank you for asking that question. So for accessibility, first, it's usually colors is one of those key items. There are different sites that you go on and can validate the color that you're about to use. And then for each color on here, you have the opportunity to actually, sorry, I'm just moving some stuff up the screen here. You have the opportunity to go on, for example, on here, you have the opportunity to go on and select the color that you want. Here, for example, you can actually say more color, and you could drop in here the color coordinates based on this website that you would have gone on. It would have given you the right colors that you can use. So that's one way. The other way is in terms of your font size. Is another example to make sure that the font you're using and the size of the font is at the right size for that audience as well. Is another example. But another way is to look at the visual that you're using and make sure the visual is not the type that doesn't lend well to accessibility itself. For those in terms of reading, I would say a picture is always better. So use more graphics to tell the story and not just these nice graphs itself. You could use a lot more pictures as well. So use pictures, and then you could put the stats on the picture, similar to what I was showing earlier for the infographics. Just more images, and less text.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think we're at time.
Yes, just about. So we're going to wrap up at this point, but I really appreciated the presentation from Aletta. I did learn something, even though I'm quite proficient in Excel. I like this other program, especially since I can do the groundwork at home, and then maybe I may not have the program until I get to work. And I can just quickly import the data into the other program and then just create my graphs and charts. I was wondering why this is not something you can probably answer because you're not a programmer, but why do the programmers of these programs come up with the most, what I consider hideous combination of carnival colors for the graphs and charts that they put in? Because as you pointed out several times in the presentations, you need to tone down, keep colors, probably try to personalize to the organization, etc., to make your presentations look more professional. But they just come on just any color that pops up, just pops up, so that you get some pretty hideous colors coming up in most of these programs. And you actually have to go in and refine them.
Actually, you can create your own, what you call your own themes. So you can go in and create your own color concept of what you want it to be. So that's something you can set up in advance. I'm trying to find. So here you have what you call view. You can go in and determine which one of these work for you. And if it doesn't, then you choose the one that you want. So you can actually say, for example, you select that is going to be the theme color that you want. You're going to see everything changing as I click it. You can come down here and go, okay, you notice this one says accessible themes. Accessibility folks would be more interested in these. I think this is new actually. I'm using a later version. So I think this answers a question asked earlier. So they've already added the colors here that best suit that audience. But yeah, you can come here and then you can start to modify it yourself and determine what colors work for you best for your entire presentation. You don't have to select anything that exists here. You can make your own. And then, so if you click on customize, for example, here it starts to give you the colors. So what colors do you want for your text? What font, what size you prefer for your cards, for your headers, your title, your general, right? Just like you were setting up a Word template, follow the same concept. Again, you can put in which colors you want and how you want to distribute those colors for sentiment, for divergent colors. You could set all of that up. Your page, again, similarly, you can do all of that. So you have the opportunity to fix it. I think they probably just place general things that people probably like. And again, as I always say, white or light gray background and put the colors on that you want on top of that instead of coloring the entire background and then put in a text in the color that you want. Yeah, but you have the options are all here. So if I change it to this, then my entire thing changed, right? So they give you a few concepts that you can work with as well. So it all dependent on what you want. It's very similar to
It's just that if you don't actually point it out in a presentation, a lot of users who are using it
yeah,
gravitate towards the default graphics, which look pretty hideous, I have to admit. I
yeah,
mean, I don't know if
yeah,
you've ever used SPSS. It's real crude graphs and charts they have in there. When you export it into Excel, you can really get refined images. So if
yes, yeah,
a lot, unless it is pointed out to persons, they won't necessarily know that they have those options to change it and personalize it and customize it. So that was important.
yeah. So yeah, you can, and some of it is dependent if the person you're presenting the report to prefers a certain color scheme, then you just need to get what the color ranges are. And for that, again, you come back to customizing and putting those color, either it's RGB or hexadecimal. You put the numbers in and away you go.
So very interesting. Yes, any more questions before we wrap up?
Yes, just one quick question. Based on your experience, though, as an evaluator, how do you find your audience receiving your report with all of these charts and these colors vis-a-vis when, well, I don't know how, I'm thinking that you would present because of your background. And so in this type of way, you tell your story with colors and, you know, with charts and colors, etc. What sort of advice would you give some of us who are still in the dark age, if I might call it that, but we are still very heavy on the words and so, and our clients seem to still accept that? What advice would you give to us or me to transition? I would like to transition. I'm liking what I see. What advice would you give to me to in terms of my own presentation to my clients?
I think the first thing would be change is not something that you can just do in a big bang sometimes, depending on who the person is. So I would say you start introducing this inside of your reports. Notice I did some PowerPoint presentations. So when you're doing your PowerPoint presentation, you could start, because normally sometimes that's how you introduce the your final results, right? You could start putting some of that into these as well. So that they start to see it slowly being introduced, making sure that as you present data, it's valuable, right? If you look at the one that I had here from this Australian site, it's putting in like new, improving, not improving, start using up the text to show it in a specific way that makes it easy for them to understand and start looking at, and then they start to gravitate towards it more. Also get feedback as well while you're doing it. I would always say, I have done visualizations where I've taken to others before, and they don't necessarily like the layout, but they like the way that it's flowing, and they say, oh, you know what, I would want the 41% here, but I want to see it over the previous month. I want to see the growth, if it's growing or not. No, I don't want those two graphs. It doesn't tell me much. I'm not going to make any decisions based on those. But you start to slowly introduce it, I would say, in your documents. Let it be part of your reports as well. So you don't necessarily have to give it all like this, but start taking out the designs, making them part of your reports as well. So if you're giving a wordy document, instead of so much text, start putting some of this visuals inside of your reports as well. And then slowly it will happen, and some will be a big bang. They're already accustomed to this sort of reporting. They would like to see this, or once they see it, they will adopt, and you just go for it. Other thing that I like with some of the apps that we use for BI reporting is that you can actually embed it. So you notice I was actually displaying the report inside of the PowerPoints. You're not leaving the medium that you're in. So you display and interact while you're in it. I always find that to be a big buy as well, because you're in the meeting, you're talking, you're interacting, it's real. It's not a static data. They can play around, ask questions, and answer. You can answer it right away. I find that to always be a big sell as well.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I'll pass it back to, I think it's Dandini, for any final comments.
Yes. So Plumaletta, really, really appreciate you taking time. We know you had conflicting meetings, but you're still here with us doing this free for CEI members and other participants. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and sharing. I'm sure lots of participants would have gleaned a lot of insight into how to better present data. I wish I could invite you to my classroom if you're willing to ever come in, because I preach a lot of these things, not the extraordinary software that you illustrated. I don't know anything about that, but from basic Excel knowledge, etc., about the overcrowding, complexity, overuse of colors, overuse of too many different types of graphs and charts. But although I preach it on a regular basis, it comes back every semester from the same students. So maybe they need to hear it from someone else to get the good message across. No, because it's really important. I think it looks so much more professional. I think people tend to go wild because they have the choice of so many different options at their disposal that they want to click and make. If they have 50 graphs, have 50 different images, which looks totally unprofessional in a report, right? So it's how to get that message across to students in the classroom. So maybe one of these days I'll invite you in, even for 5 minutes, because I know you're very busy, just to hammer home that point for me. But really appreciate really appreciate the presentation, as I'm sure all persons online did. It was really very, very interesting. And we look forward to welcoming you again to present on another aspect that you can zoom in on a different thing at some later point. Maybe not this year, in another year or so, because it's really good to have these presentations so that members can learn and develop professionally. We all want to excel at what we do, and we have to capitalize on everybody's strengths and try to eliminate our own weaknesses. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
I will just add my thanks also to both Nadine and Plumaletta, and say that, you know, if there is enough interest, we may offer this as a modules of this as a course in the future. So hang on for that. For those of you who are not members of the CEI and do not regularly get information from us, please join us at, I've put it in the chat, caribeval.org. You can join as a general partner and receive, you know, emails. You can also join as a full member and receive a lot more benefits, part of a very dynamic network, and also opportunities for you know, joint working, for training that will not cost as much as if you're not a member. Usually these webinars, as short as they are, have a nominal charge for people who are non-members. This first one, obviously, we offered for free, just part of our 10th anniversary, but we will have others throughout the rest of the year. And hope that you'll become a member so it doesn't have to cost you individually. So with that said, you know, I will just close off and thank everyone for coming, and just stay tuned. Okay, and we are adjourned. Thanks again, all.